technology and innovation here at the World Bank. Welcome to this webinar. We're very excited to be able to share with you the European experiences around the application of DigComp Edu, and how they've been thinking about developing digital skills. We have a fantastic panel with us here today. Just to note also that we'll have both Spanish and English translation. So you'll see kind of at the bottom the interpretation button that you can push to both receive either English or Spanish, depending on your language. And we encourage everybody to put their Q&A into the chat itself. This will be kind of one of a number of webinars that we'll be giving on this theme to kind of share different experiences around the use of digital skills. In our own portfolio, we have a number of countries that are looking at ways in which to effectively develop digital skills, both in students as well as in teachers. And we'll also talk a bit about how countries are looking at both defining these digital skills, operationalizing them in a curriculum, assessing them, and then the extent to which the market is demanding and these skills are being responsive to this demand in the market. So without any further ado, let me ask our first presenter, Yves Pounet, to introduce himself and to share a little bit about the experience that he has had with DigComp. Yves?
Hello, good afternoon from Europe, at least good afternoon, and thank you. It's a real pleasure to be with you and to share with you the European experiences on addressing digital skills, and especially also related to the Digital Competence Framework. So I am the Deputy Head of Unit of the GRC unit dealing with human capital and employment. And just one word about what is the GRC. So the GRC is the Joint Research Center from the European Commission, which is basically the in-house research laboratory, if you want, of the European Commission, doing studies, analysis, evidence, contributing to European policies in many, many different areas. And in our case, of course, specifically related to digital skills, digital education, and key competences for lifelong learning. So basically, we're based in Sevilla, in the south of Spain, and from there we've been developing a number of what we call Digital Competence Framework, and the DigComp framework is one of them. Rina, next slide, please. My colleague Rina will give you in a minute more details on the Digital Competence Framework, but just to highlight that digital skills challenges, they remain and they are also very, very high on the European policy agenda. And actually, the European Commission just released in September a new digital education action plan, which sets out the agenda at the European level together with the member states for the next 7 years on addressing challenges related to digital education and digital skills. And on the slide, well, in the action plan, there are 14 actions, specific concrete actions proposed, and actually half of them, 7, relate to digital skills and digital competence. Some of them are related, for example, and Rina will explain you, an update of the Digital Competence Framework we're going to do, and also at the European level, we're going to try to develop a European digital skills certification system, so that all these people who acquire digital skills, that these can also be somehow recognized across countries, across regions, across borders within Europe. Without any further delay, I'll stop here. I'll be with you for the question and answers, and I'll give you now the floor to my colleague Rina, who gives you the more details about the Digital Competence Framework. The floor is yours, Rina. Thank you.
Thank you, Yves, and also good morning or good afternoon, depending where you are in the world. From my part, I have 4 points to go through, and I will go through quite quickly because we have a time limitation. We look at the definition of digital competence according to our DigComp framework. We'll talk a little bit about commonalities between these frameworks. We talk about DigComp in employment, and I give you a little update about what's going to happen with future work. So what does it really mean to be digitally competent? In a European context, we have the key competencies for lifelong learning, and digital competence is one of them. In 2018, there was a renewed publication, and within that one, we have this new definition, which is saying critical competence involves confident, critical, responsible use of, and engagement with the full range of digital technologies for learning, work, and for participation in society. So there are all these different aspects that we are looking at. And also what is important to understand is that competence itself is composed of not only practical skills, but also about knowledge and attitudes towards use. Attitude could be interest, motivation, or also critical attitude towards them. In the DigComp framework, how we have sort of conceptualized that definition is by first saying that there's a list of 21 competencies, and you can see this list on the right side of the screen. All these 21 competencies are included in 5 areas. We have first information and data literacy. We have communication and collaboration through digital technologies. We have digital content creation, safety, and importantly, problem solving. I would like to highlight that the problem solving, you can see on the side here, the 4 competencies in that area, that this is a really transversal going through all other areas too. And this is not only, let's say, technical part of it, but really identifying needs in life and how you can have a technological response to them, but also creatively using digital technologies. And here we are talking about problem solving either individually or collaboratively. The DigComp framework itself is composed of different dimensions. So what you just saw there, the list of 21 competencies, they are outlined in this DigComp 2.0 publication, and it came out 2016. We have also proficiency levels. We have identified learning outcomes on 8 levels for each of the 21 competencies, and they are in this publication called DigComp 2.1. There are also some examples of use, either in educational context or in the workplace context. So why do we have these reference frameworks? Why is it important to have such thing in the European context? Most importantly, this really creates a common understanding among member states, among stakeholders, to define what is actually digital skills or digital competence, and gives a great set of vocabularies and definitions. This also allows us to create a common vision, what is needed in terms of achieve these competencies. And very importantly, it really helps to mobilize all the stakeholders to take initiatives. In our work since 2016, when we started really more systematically mapping where the use cases are, we see the use for policy formulation and support. We saw using this framework for instructional planning, so training content, part of the curriculum, so on, but also for assessment and certification. Let me see. We also, it was asked, since we are in the context, in the worldwide context, what is the link between all these different frameworks that are about digital skills or media literacy and so on. So here I have put you a reference to a paper that even I have written a few years ago for ITU. And there we really outline how complementary actually UNESCO's MIL framework and DigComp framework are. More importantly, you can see here that the first area is information literacy. And there we have a lot of commonalities. We talk about the same things: critically evaluate media content, how to organize information, and so on. Also the collaboration part is very similar. Content creation is very similar. What sets DigComp apart from UNESCO's MIL framework is really more the focus on digital technologies, protecting devices, protecting your personal data, also the health and well-being, which now becomes very important through that. And as I already mentioned, the area of problem solving is actually quite unique to DigComp framework. I will give you a few words also about the work that we have done in the employment sector. Most of the work that we've done is actually, in the beginning, was a lot with training providers and with more maybe educational sector. And now here we just, in July 2020, we were able to publish 2 different publications. One is with the case studies, and the other one is a real implementation guide to help you through the tasks. So I will first give you an example of the work in the DigComp at work. We have case studies, like I mentioned, and they are in areas, they are looking at the labor, media, LMI, if that's, now I'm labor, immediate.
No, it's labor market intermediaries.
Exactly, labor market.
Like employment
intermediates.
and
Exactly, yes. So we looked at different ones, those that are looking at how to put students in initial education, how to form them for the labor market, also like public employment services, those who address critical barriers to employment. We looked at examples in trade unions, employer and associations, but also all other types of upskilling providers that are in the market. Some of them are here documented as case studies. What you see here, these little C1, C2, those are the case studies in these areas. And they all use DigComp in one way or the other. Actually, the guide is quite detailed, and you can also see, really looking at the list of 21 competencies in each of the cases, it has been identified which competencies are being used and how they are being used. Are they, for example, being used for job profiling or specific job profiles? Are they used for self-assessment and so on? And interestingly, we have here one of the case studies is also Ikanos, so you will be getting a little taster just in a while. The other part of this is the implementation guideline, and here we have really outlined sort of step-by-step process and what you should be doing. And there are here references, for example, getting started with your DigComp-based project. What are the things you might be looking at? Next, during your projects and after your projects. So here we have a really kind of a hands-on guide to get on. Other parts also are being looked at, and of course, certification is something that comes up quite often, and there's something about that too. I will just spend now a few minutes telling you about the update of DigComp. As you already heard the first conceptual model, which outlines those 21 competencies that was created in 2016. As we all know, there's quite a few issues that have emerged since then. And especially now we are seeing new context where digital technologies are being used. And for our purpose, we need a little update or refreshing. And the issues that we are seeing around us that are now currently not necessarily addressed in very explicit manner in the DigComp framework, they are also topics such as misinformation and disinformation. In the framework, we talk about critically reading the news or the items and the information, but also critically looking at the source. Here we need to also go a little bit further and discuss the new phenomenon of misinformation. We want to also focus on green skills, green ICT use, like how can you be a little bit more environmentally friendly? And here also the knowledge about that topic is increasing. We have new technologies. DigComp, actually what is important is what we say technology agnostic. We don't talk about using smartphones or laptops. We use kind of generic term digital technologies so that you can put different technologies under it. Now we have emerging technologies such as social robotics. We have virtual reality. We have vacuum cleaners that are robotics. So we need to also look what kind of a skill set and how do you apply DigComp in that kind of context. Importantly, datafication of our lives. We have personal data being collected. We have behavioral data being collected. We need more awareness about that. But also applications of AI. This is talked about a lot. What happens with the recommender systems, social media, all those algorithms that create certain type of bubbles where you live in without you understanding. So this DigComp update will focus on the dimension 4. So we will keep the list of competencies as they are, their descriptors as they are, but I give you an example here. What do we mean by dimension 4? So these are examples
giving you the
of knowledge.
The 1 minute warning, Rina.
Thank you. We're good. So we are here, the examples of what kind of knowledge do you need, what kind of skills do you need, and what kind of attitudes do you need. Here we have the competence called understanding copyrights and licenses. This is actually our sister framework called the Framework for Digital Consumers. But here you see that we outline knowing that some digital content is available for free, being aware that streaming and downloading movies is illegal, a skill, being able to act, attitude, being respectful, weighing the benefits, and so on. So we take those new topics and tie them into these examples of knowledge, skills, and attitudes. And that work will start in the beginning of next year, and we will have a new version, DigComp 2.2, at the end of the year, or beginning of 2021. Most of the work will be done through DigComp community of practice, and here you have a link for the community of practice. This is where we encourage all people who are using DigComp currently to sign up and sort of build that association and build that sharing of practices, build that awareness, what we have been doing, what works, what not. So that is up there. We are also at the end of the year coming up with a new self-reflection tool for digital competence so that citizens can go and sort of get an understanding where they stand with their digital competence and what they should be doing next. So with that one, racing to the end, I thank you for your attention, and I will make the slides available later.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Rina. So I'd now like to introduce Ana Victoria, who is going to kind of share with you how, in the case of Spain, they've taken this framework and actually applied it. Ana Victoria, over to you. And Anna, you're on mute, but maybe also just to introduce yourself, and then maybe a little bit about Ikanos. You're still on. There we go.
Ahora.
Perfect. You're back.
Sorry. ¿Se ve mi pantalla?
Can you see my screen? Perfectly. Terrific.
Bueno, voy a hacer mi intervención en
I
castellano.
will speak in Spanish, but I will be interpreted into English very kindly. Mariana, thank you very much, Mariana, and thank you very much to the whole team at the World Bank for allowing us to be part of this session and for having this, to invite us to present how we have taken DigComp into practice. Anna, for those...
There is a translation interpretation button at the bottom that you can choose English, and there is simultaneous translation. Hay una traducción que acaba de decir Ana. Disculpa, sigue.
Sorry, Anna, now you can go ahead. If you wish to ask any questions, you can write them in the chat box. I work for the Basque government. The Basque country is a small region, little over 2 million inhabitants in the Spanish state, right next to France. We have a very strong government. We have our own parliament. We have fiscal autonomy. And the regional government provides most of the public services. We have our own language, Basque, and we have a very high industrial percentage of GDP, 24.3. We also have a working population with higher education at a level of 35% of the population. For our strategic planning, we prepare plans every 5 years. In the plan established in 2012, we decided we wanted to incorporate digital competences as an element. We were very lucky in 2012 because we became acquainted with DigComp. We have been working with them and developing the project and the initiative, I'd say, this umbrella project of Ikanos. Our idea is that to be able to have full development, we need to grow digital skills of people, and that the public sector has to help with ideas and tools. We have a very practical project. We want to define and facilitate the way in which digital skills can be acquired, assessed, certified, and accredited for individuals, organizations, and also sectors. The main action lines of Ikanos are awareness, facilitating the process, and having a project that is in constant innovation. Regarding awareness, sometimes not much attention is given to this, but I believe raising awareness is very, very important, especially in what has to do with information technologies, because of the permanent change these technologies undergo. We need to spread the news, and we have to have our professors be aware of these changes. And from the public sector, we need to have a certain technological oversight so as to be able to incorporate these new technologies. We also work to improve these digital skills so that they can be used in learning and employability of individuals. What do we do to be able to disseminate these resources? Well, we have our website. This is new. Our new website was started this week. It is not only a means of communication, but also most of the tools that I will discuss are also available there. These are online tools and they can be used and they are open to the public. Our website is in Euskera, which is our language, and also in Spanish and also in English. So anyone can go to icanos.eus and have access to these tools. I will discuss with you the different resources. We, for example, carry out conferences and workshops. With the pandemic, we have had an incentive for people to take a time for reflection. People are at home, and we are seeing the importance that is being given to training. This is an urgent matter. It is not just important, it is also urgent. For us, something that has been the basis of our work and our inspiration has been the DigComp framework. I was feeling a bit nostalgic, so I included this photo here. You can see Sebastian when DigComp was just starting, and Sebastian was explaining to us, and I'd like to thank you all for providing this framework, which has been so useful to all of us and the team of JRC and all the help they have given us. You can see here the innovation team from the education department. They were the first ones to understand the opportunity that DigComp represented. And in 2014, they were already presenting their project. We have created this system of stakeholders. And what we have done was provide ICANOs and encourage others to use it. And we have been able to do so successfully. Another one of the action lines we have is what has to do with our support service. We are providing this accompaniment in the process through a roadmap so that the different individuals, companies, organizations, or sectors, for them to be able to work so as to improve their digital skills.
We refer to this as the ICANOS model, and we have different levels, users, individuals, groups, and through our website, you can go through the process and use the different tools specifically. And we also refer to lifelong learning and how this can be done independently, and this is part of our roadmap. And we also reach out to the school sector, and we work with all of the different teachers in the Basque country. And we've had a number of requests from all over the world to use this tool, and we make it available for everyone, but we have enormous demand for the use of the tool in order to provide learning. Now, the model includes 6 different steps. And as you can see here, we have an integrated circle, but there are specific areas. We have developed 14 different tools. Now, first of all, we need to define the different competences, the skills of the European methodological framework. This is very user-friendly, and we use this especially with different companies and corporations. And what it does is it clearly defines the space. Then we go into audit. And here what we do is review the starting point, and we see how learning begins. Then we review the results, and we provide a guide. And we also establish the different goals for learning, and then we sum up with the evidence. But these are the different stages. But then we also need to refer to the self-evaluation test. This is a questionnaire, the self-assessment test. This includes 23 questions. First of all, one evaluates one's own knowledge. And then in looking at the questionnaire, you become aware of not know. And this provides an integration of the different elements that make up digital skills. So it's very prescriptive. It is not simply an evaluation. What we have, again, we have 23 questions, 120 items, and all of this takes about 20 minutes, and it is translated into 5 languages: Spanish, Basque, English, and it's also available in Portuguese, although we don't yet have a website in Portuguese and Greek. But it is available if anyone is interested. So we can make access available. It can be used on an iPad, a tablet, or a mobile device. There is a general version, and then we have more specialized versions. And there are some additional specific questions for different, and we'll talk about that later. And for this, you have a downloadable PDF with the results. We now have more than 70,000 personal digital profiles. And this is a database over the years, which is quite significant, and we can say that it is useful. Here you can see the different type questions. You can see the initial questions on evaluating information. This is used by young people. It's used by those participants of any age.
Determinadas organizaciones que se acercan a nosotros, que tenemos una oficina de atención.
And now we also have those who approach us. We have a specialized office when we receive requests, and we have a new customized Econos test version. And here what we can see is how to find and access the information. And we can see the different questions. Now, in this case, what we have are first of all, some general questions for the instructors, and then for different areas of education, primary school, secondary, university. These can be more specific, and these can be single tests that are segmented. We're doing this with the engineers. 2 more minutes. Oh, terrible. Well, consequently, we also have a results test, and we have the different levels as explained. Here we have the different points.
Puede hacer de carácter grupal, con lo que se obtiene una imagen gráfica que sería, pues, en vez de ser un resultado único sobre toda la base de datos.
Well, we could have a single result based on the database, or we also have for the database a different level or layer.
We can see a huge amount of information there. Afterwards, we also have what has to do with the professional digital profile. We see in the different levels, which would be the objective profiles that need to be achieved. We can see, for example, in the case of the competencies for physicians in the Basque public health system, we have this methodological system with the competences they need to have. For example, the levels of competence that are critical specifically for specific professions. This is an example of specific competences for primary care professionals in the health sector. They need to have a certain level of competences. These are all of the profiles that have been developed, and you can find them in our website. They are in Spanish, but the graphics are very clear. Finally, I'd like to share with you the Basque Digital Certification System. For 12 years, we have been developing what used to be a certification system based on tools, and we have now turned that system into this system where we are certifying digital competences. We use a web support. It is free of charge. Anyone in the Basque country can do this. They can take the test, which is administered with monitors, because for many jobs in the public sector, this certification is compulsory. We also ensure that the project is permanently updated. We make sure that it is innovative. And many people ask, well, how do we do this? How do we do that? We have an expert team, Roberto Harsegui. He's here, he's listening to us in case there is a technical question or someone wishes to talk to him. He's an expert in digital competences. He's part of the project. And we also have a team with international collaboration as well. We work on real things. We are not working on a theoretical ground. We work based on real cases, practical cases. And we also have this ecosystem of institutions. We foster their work in this field. And then with the possibilities that DigComp provides, they can start their own projects. We also have plenty of international cooperation with the European Commission, for example, and with parallel projects. To wrap up, I'll say that we continue to work on this task. There are so many things to do, but we're so happy because we know, thanks Rina, we know, and thanks Eve, we know that DigComp will continue to evolve, and it is for us so important to continue to work with this team. We know they will continue to evolve, and we will do the same. And with issues as important as artificial intelligence, we are doing something small, but it is not easy for these projects to work, but it does work. So we know, we believe small is beautiful, and we hope this small project of the Basque country can be inspiring to you, and it can be useful for the audience. Thank you very much. You finished in time.
Pass the baton to our colleague Sajita, who's going to reflect a bit on these presentations, talk a bit about how they apply to some of our clients in our portfolio, and also reflect a little bit on her work in Africa. To you, Sajita.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. And I really wish to congratulate our colleagues from the EU DigComp as well as from ICANOS for their excellent presentations. I do believe that digital skills frameworks and how we apply them are essential to defining what we want to do in this space. My name is Sajida Bashir. I lead the work on digital skills in the bank. I'm the advisor in the Office of the Global Director for Education at the bank. I should start by saying I think the World Bank is a late entrant into the field of digital skills. And the way we started was that one of the 5 pillars of the digital economy for Africa, the initiative that started this work and which has spread to other regions, had a pillar on digital skills. But when I joined that initiative to lead the work on behalf of the Education GP in late 2018, so we're talking of 2 years ago, there was actually a lot of confusion about how we were using the term digital skills. This terminology varied across the 5 pillars, each of which was led by a different global practice, as well as the IFC, our private sector arm. And what was called basic, advanced, etc., was really fuzzy. So you were able to turn on a device, or you're able to do software programming. You had digital skills, but what did that actually mean? This was a problem. And in some cases, the earlier framework of the ITU was used. And some people even wondered whether we should be talking about digital skills. And I'm sure you have faced those questions also. So we had to clarify what we meant by digital skills. And we produced a paper in early 2019, a link to which is given in the invitation. So I and the small kind of research team, mainly consisting of consultants, went through literally scores of frameworks, most of them in Europe, North America, and East Asia. And these are listed in the annex to the paper. But what we found to be the most comprehensive and well-structured was the EU DigComp version 2.1, which has just been presented. And even better for our purposes was the adaptation and some minor enhancements that were done by the UNESCO when they developed the Global Digital Literacy Framework, which was based on version 2.0 of the EU DigComp. And because we found this good, because it was adapted for developing countries and included 2 other competencies, which I will show you. And we were therefore recommended in our paper and in subsequent work that the UNESCO Global Digital Literacy Framework and the EU DigComp 2.1 be used and adapted to define competencies and proficiency levels. So I'm glad to say that as a result of that work, and I'll now share my screen. I don't know if you can see it, but you know, this framework using EU DigComp 2.1 as well as the UNESCO framework, that this is now being accepted across the range of work we are doing on the digital economy in Africa, Asia, and across the world, across the different global practices. And this slide that you're seeing is actually the guidebook that we developed, which is now available on the Open Learning Campus, and it references these 2 frameworks. So it's a major achievement, and it builds on what you have done. So I think I want to also thank you for that. However, in our work, we had to make an important distinction and addition. We distinguished between digital skills for the citizens and non-ICT professions and the digital skills for the ICT professions, because in our work related to digital economy, all these things were important. And of course, we know that the distinctions between ICT professions and non-ICT professions are blurring. But for the ICT professions proper, we suggested using the EU's e-competence framework, even though there are many national frameworks and those developed by industry. Okay, so our overall approach is this. We consider digital skills for digitally competent workforce and for digitally literate citizens. Within the digitally competent workforce, we distinguish between the ICT professions and non-ICT professions. For the ICT professions, suggest using the EU's e-competence framework. For all the others, suggest using the EU DigComp 2.1 or the Digital Global Literacy Framework of UNESCO. And as I said, the digital skills, that framework that we use basically is the EU DigComp and UNESCO one. There are 2 additional domains to what was mentioned earlier, that is on devices and software operations. And the last one is on career-related competencies. So now I just want to turn briefly to what did we learn from our work with countries in Africa and in Asia where we're trying to apply this framework. First, it was really difficult to get policymakers, people in the ministries of education, consultants, even our team, our staff, to understand these general digital literacies, competencies for citizens and non-ICT professions, because the focus tended to be on the ICT professions. The general digital competencies, you know, can you turn on a phone, surf the net, you know, use different devices? Well, you pick that up you know, from peer-to-peer learning or from kids or your ISP provider, you didn't need really formal training. So this was a difficult, you know, mindset change, which I don't think we have completely succeeded in, that this also requires, you know, structure and training and so on. The second important issue was, how do these digital skills relate to other skills? In the case of Africa and Asia, often literacy and numeracy, but also the general skills qualification frameworks. Many countries have such frameworks, but they struggled whether the digital skills should be incorporated within these broader frameworks. Do you need a separate framework? And I think it would have been good to elaborate whether you address some of these questions also. Third is the question of how frequently should the frameworks be revised. DigComp 2.2 is already developed, and we know technologies are rapidly changing. The question of devices and technologies is really important. What you learn with a 2G phone, or whether you have a smartphone or a high-speed computer, this is going to be very different. How do we bring this into a framework, especially for developing countries, where there is often leapfrogging on the devices and technologies, but not on the skills? And this is a question we faced. Fourth, one of the attractions of the DigComp kind of framework are the examples of education, work, and training. And Anna went through these. I think these are excellent. The issue was, of course, we found that many of them were not relevant for the developing countries. And this is because, you know, work in Africa and Asia is really in the informal sector. 90% of people work in the informal sector. And so we were really trying to explain to people.
Y tratamos de explicar que es necesario tener las capacitaciones básicas para la mayoría de la población. Y luego quizá cuando hay más especialización, hay una proporción más baja que tenga las mismas capacitaciones. Pero ¿esto qué quiere decir? Por ejemplo, para un trabajador en Ghana o para un pequeño mercado que está tratando de vender en una plataforma. Se integran sus habilidades, pero ¿cómo se puede traducir para que sea algo entendible, para que los capacitadores lo puedan explicar? Y me parece que es algo que debe estar haciendo el banco. Hay muchos puntos adicionales, pero me voy a referir a la evaluación y me voy a referir al ejemplo de Icanos. Se me hace maravilloso y creo que este ejemplo nos muestra que se puede hacer, pero es un contexto mucho más avanzado. Entonces, ¿cómo logramos las evaluaciones para nuestros contextos?
Sajita, one second, please. Nancy,
Sajita, un segundo. Perdón. Es que no se veían los canales con la pantalla.
It's okay.
Ya, sí. Okay. Ahora.
So yeah, just to wrap up, you know, on assessment is, how do we develop simple assessments for our context? Do we go with self-reporting, which are some of the tests are like that, but what do you do when people may not be literate enough to do that? Do we go with population-based assessments? Even if they're sample-based, they're useful, but they're expensive, but they have to be infrequent. Or do we do universal kind of assessments, at least in education institutions, and then have like packages that institutions could implement? These were some of the issues that were discussed in our work. Assessments also tend to be device dependent. We know that that was a problem, for instance, with the ICDL, the International Computer Literacy Program. So we need to develop simple assessments that can help our countries see whether a large proportion of their citizens and of their students are actually getting more digitally proficient. So this is another critical area of work. And therefore, to sum up, I think that these are great examples that we should learn from, but we need adaptation to the conditions of work and the conditions of training and the conditions of the citizens in developing countries, which
is a lot of work ahead of us in the World Bank. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sajita. I think one of the questions was very much along these lines of assessment from Bin in the chat, and we shared kind of what the Econos approach is. And maybe just to follow up on that for Econos is how has your assessment evolved? In the bank, we've also been looking at opportunities for kind of authentic task-based assessment linked to specific skills and using a more 360-degree methodology where we look at self-assessment, but also expert, peer, and incorporating computer measures into assessments. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how your thinking is evolving on assessment. Ana Victoria or Roberto? Está bien, Ana.
Se escucha, Ana. Ana. I was talking about the assessment process, the evaluation process. And how this has evolved in order to provide measurements. Yes, we can hear now. So the self-evaluation process is something which for us is not an end, but it's merely the initiation of a process. So we allow for self-evaluations, but this also allows for self-reflection. And this is very important in order to better establish the goals, the objectives for starting the learning process. But in order to assess properly, we also need to go to the final certification process, which I explained very quickly. We have a system which allows the Basque country to certify. And what this does is provide more value for the marketplace, because the certification of digital skills doesn't exist in any country today. And so these skills are not recognized, but there is a European program that also includes the possibility of there being a European certification. But this is the final goal. So I hope I've answered the question.
Gracias, Ana. Thank you very much, Ana.
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Ana.
To Yves and Rina, one of the questions that came up in the chat is, how are we evaluating the extent to which this framework and these skills and the evaluation of these skills are kind of meeting the needs in the real world, and kind of your interaction with the private sector in both defining the skills, being able to evaluate them and determine whether indeed individuals who are attaining these skills are actually being able to apply them in the real world.
Thank you, Robert. And first of all, thanks all of you, also the speakers from the World Bank, and also Econos, of course, for their very nice references to the work on DigComp. We're obviously very, very pleased that it's so widely taken up. And I very much would also like to, to back up what UNESCO did together now also with the World Bank to, try to see how the DigComp framework can also be used in a development context. And then adding these competence level 6 and 7, which is certainly work that is very, very good and absolutely makes sense. No, so we very much welcome that and support that. Related to the question, well, maybe what we try to do also in our work, and that's why Arina mentioned it, is that in addition to having the framework, because the framework, of course, is only one thing, is one step, but it has to be put into practice. And that's why we have these case studies. And that's why we published the DigComp at Work report with these case studies. We exactly try to describe much more in detail how, in practice, the DigComp can be used for example, employability purposes, but also, for example, for student assessment or for the revision of curricula. And on the basis of that, that's why we also have an additional publication released now in July, which is called the accompanying guide for implementation of DigComp, the stakeholder implementation guide, which gives, again, concrete steps how that if a stakeholder wants to use the framework, how this can be put into practice. So with that kind of an evidence and analysis, we try to show and demonstrate that it can be made concrete, adapted to specific local context, and for these purposes. Maybe also another point that I would like to highlight, because it was also mentioned in the Q&A, is that the DigComp framework is developed indeed for individuals, for citizens, can also be applied into a learning context. But then the question is, and for that actually we developed an additional separate specific where we have more specific educator specific digital competence. We are now also developing a self-reflection instrument, both for school education and also has already been used also in higher. And that comes back maybe also to what the issue of assessment is, of course, and self-assessment and self-reflection is a key issue. And there are many different approaches also in Europe being taken. Like Icano's example shows the first step, kind of a self-reflection, then following training, then do a real test, and then get a certificate, which is a way that is being used in many different countries. And we at the European level, we try to also emphasize a lot that kind of self-reflection approach. And the reason for that is that we see it also as a kind of awareness raising and a motivational tool for users to understand, first of all, that they lack certain digital competences. And then once you have that understanding and awareness, you can then look for training, for help and support, and develop these further. So these kind of self-reflection instruments, of course, they are not accurate in terms of measuring skills, but they have a different purpose. They have an awareness raising and a motivational kind of purpose. And that I just wanted to highlight as well. And then maybe finally, because we have the DigComp framework for individuals, we have the DigComp framework for educators, and actually we now also developed one for schools or educational organizations. And there we have a fully fledged self-reflection instrument available, which is called Selfie. It's for schools digital capacity. And there we can provide the link also in the chat if you want, which is also widely used within Europe and outside of Europe context.
Thanks, Yves. Even Rina, there are a few additional questions on updating the framework, if you could just answer in the chat. But we have about a minute left. I'd like to pass the final word to Sajita to share a little bit about where you can find some of the work that she's done. Sajita,
thanks a lot, Bob. And I think we'll be passing on the link to the paper. I don't know about external people, but Iñaki will definitely send it out again. But I wish to say that the work of that paper is reflected in the Digital Economy for Africa and South Asia country diagnostics, and we can I'm sure you can search that, but we can send you the link. And it is also going to be available in a forthcoming book of the World Bank prepared by the Digital Development Team on digital capabilities. There'll be a chapter on digital skills, so this work will be referenced there. But bottom line is we'll share the link, of that paper. There was one question about how can the WB learn from the EU experience in order to promote these skills during early years of schooling? We are recommending that, obviously, that it should be from the foundational years itself. But however, the reality is that in many African Asian countries, developing country contexts, you don't have the basic conditions. You don't have the devices, you may not even have electricity. And we know that teaching through computer labs and such like things don't always work. So we have to think of new delivery mechanisms whereby digital skills can be taught, as part of the curriculum or as extracurricular things, but according to a framework. I think that is the critical thing. However we are delivering it, we need to have a framework, and we suggested adapting this framework. Don't reinvent the wheel, but the work of adaptation, as Ikanos showed, is also extremely complex, and that is what we should be engaging in.
Thanks very much, Sajita. That's a great point to end on, that at the end of the day, we'll have to kind of work with our clients to really adapt and contextualize all of this knowledge to their own reality. So I'd just like to thank everybody for their participation. We'll share the recording and the presentations with you. This will be one of a number of series that we'll be working on across the bank on digital skills. And I'd like to thank our presenters, Yves, Rina, Anna, and Sajita, as well as everybody who helped make this happen, Iñaki, Roberto, and the rest. So thanks everybody very much, and have a fantastic day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. A pleasure. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Great to have shared this with you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi, Gregory. This is Nancy.